Hi, I'm Jessie Prey.
And I'm Andy Cassette. If you're captivated by true crime stories that delve deep into the complexities of love and betrayal, Love Murder is your next binge.
Each week, we present long-form narrative episodes backed by meticulous research, exploring cases where passion leads to peril.
Take, for instance, Blanche Taylor Moore, a seemingly devout preacher's wife who concealed a deadly secret, leaving a trail of poisoned partners.
Or the tragic tale of Chad Shelton and Dwayne Johnson, whose sudden deaths unveiled a web of familial deceit and revenge.
These aren't just stories. They're deep dives into the human psyche and the dark side of love.
Join us on Love Murder as we uncover the chilling narratives of love gone fatally wrong.
Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 418 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. And you?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing all right.
Do you know any other yous besides that sheep over there?
Nope. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Cassidy Falling.
Hey, Fallen.
Marianne Gibbs Morris.
Oh, thanks, Marianne.
Jodette Kitchens.
What's up, Jodette?
Amy Goldstein.
There's Amy.
Karen Rose.
Hey, Rose.
Paul Harborn.
That's a fun Harborn.
Yeah, you said it correctly there. On Patreon, you messed it up really badly. Camaro Patch.
Patch. Remember that show with Patch that threw the wrench and dodgeball? Wasn't its name Patch?
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I got a memory like, you know.
Steel Trap.
Yeah.
Chloe Vrogindaway. That's what I'm going with.
Easy for you to say.
It's not, but that's what I'm going with.
Thanks, Chloe.
And last but not least, Dar Wilhite.
Hey, Dar.
Then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Chiquita Clark.
Thanks, CC.
We also had a great PayPal donation from Rachel Kunz.
Coon's standing up.
So thank you to everyone who helps support the show. Gibbs, we have an episode out right now on True Crime All the Time where we're talking about Meg Wellnitz Appleton and Bill Meese in 1993. Joe Wellnitz, his wife Beth, and their 20-year-old son Dennis were murdered inside their Kentucky home. The police had their suspicions early on, but it took them nearly a decade to, catch the killer.
But persistence pays off.
It does, and there's a lot of interesting facets to the case. Also wanted to make an announcement that True Crime All the Time Unsolved, the podcast, is now on YouTube. So, most people listen to it, on Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever it is. But you can also now listen to it on YouTube. Just search True Crime All the Time Unsolved. And True Crime All the Time is on there as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am so ready.
In March 1998, Father Alfred Kunz was murdered inside St. Michael Catholic Church in Dane, Wisconsin. Many believe he was murdered because he had knowledge of sexual misconduct within the church, while others say he was murdered because of allegedly inappropriate relationships with female parishioners. So we have a man of the cloth being murdered inside of a church. But it's, going to be the reason behind it and the who, the when, the why, all those questions that we're going to get into.
Pretty controversial.
Alfred Kunz was born on April 15th, 1930. He was one of 8 children and grew up on a farm in Stitzer, Wisconsin. He occasionally worked in his family's basement cheese factory.
Wow, right there. Wisconsin, cheese, making it in the basement.
Probably pretty good. I don't know. But, if you put some cheese curds in front of me, I'm not going to say no.
I probably have to see how the basement looks before I eat cheese from somebody's basement that was made there.
Yeah, I think that's a big factor. cleanliness of the basement. Kunz suffered from appendicitis at age 10. When he woke up from surgery, he told his mother, "I'm going to be a priest."
That is not what I said when I woke up from my surgery from having appendicitis.
No, you said a lot of things, most of them very vulgar.
I apologize to the nurses.
Yeah, it was because of the medicine, I think. But, this is interesting. How does a person who ultimately goes on to become, a priest kind of get that calling? And here we find out that somehow he got it as a result of, this surgery, but it was very early on, 10 years old.
That is early. That's when you determine that you want to give your life to the priesthood.
He attended mass at a local church, which confirmed his decision to be a priest. Father Kunz was ordained as a priest in 1956. In 1967, he was appointed to St. Michael in Dane, Wisconsin, a small rural community. Most people in town knew Father Kunz, even if they didn't go to his church. St. Michael has since been renamed Trinity Catholic Parish. Father Kunz got a position in the marriage tribunal in Madison and helped decide which couples could get annulments.
It's a pretty important tribunal in the Catholic Church.
I would think so. Father Kunz became a priest just 2 years after Vatican II ended. Vatican II was a series of conferences that took place from 1962 to 1965, where church leaders made new rules for Mass, the lives of priests, and other issues. Priests were instructed to say Mass in the language of the people, and the use of Latin was discouraged.
Latin is a very difficult language to use.
Yeah, I know you mastered it very, very early on in life at a young age. It's just not used as much anymore.
No, and you're right. It was. I mean, it was early age. I started off with Pig Latin,
which is much easier.
Yeah, and then I eventually worked my way into Latin. Yeah.
You have a system for everything.
I do.
Some of it makes sense. Some of it does not.
Mostly the
latter.
The latter.
For several years, Father Kunz embraced the changes, but he eventually came to believe the church's history was being erased. He became known for offering Latin Mass 3 times a week for the students at St. Michael's School and once on Sundays. Some people drove over 100 miles to attend his Latin Mass.
Wow, that's dedication.
Well, and I think what it shows you is that there were other people too who still wanted that form. Father Kunz was revered by many, but others thought his interpretation of the Bible was too harsh and strict. He believed church members needed to attend every week and follow the 10 commandments. He also believed priests were held to a higher standard and that a priest's sins could cause his parishioners to go to hell. Okay. It's not one I've heard of, but, I thought the 10 commandments were supposed to be followed. It also makes sense, right? That priests are held to a higher standard.
You would think that would just be normal, part of the priesthood.
But Father Kunz also believed sending children to public school could risk sending them to hell. He also talked about damnation in the afterlife with children because he thought they would not understand the reward of heaven without fear of hell.
So he wanted the kids to go to Catholic school?
Yeah, that's what I was getting. But what I'm really getting from him is kind of a real fire and brimstone type, very strict, no deviation, the harshest, strictest interpretation of the Bible.
I just felt a ruler hitting across my hand.
Yeah, which I'm sure you got a lot. Father Kunz also made controversial decisions. During his 31 years of leadership, a group of nuns disagreed with how he ran the school, so he removed them from the staff. He chose Maureen O'Leary to serve as principal. She had a close relationship with Father Kunz, and there was speculation there was something going on between them, although there was no evidence to prove this. All right, if you disagree with him, He's going to get rid of you. And we also have this speculation that, there's a little hanky-panky going on between him and the principal.
A little hanky-panky going on at the Catholic school?
Maybe. Father Kunz also disbanded the St. Michael Parish Council, who were elected by church members to advise him on how to operate the church. According to Dane County officials, large amounts of money were being moved from one church account to another in the months before Father Kunz's death. A 1998 article by the Wisconsin State Journal mentions that the church was struggling financially.
Sounds like he wanted total control of the church, though.
And maybe of its money? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Although his teachings were polarizing, it seemed like most people in Dane and the surrounding area thought that Father Kunz had a good heart. He was known for giving money to people in need, whether they were a member of the church or not. He kept the church doors unlocked because he believed the building should be open at all hours for anyone in need. He even helped parishioners when they had car trouble. So there's a dichotomy here, right? You're getting some stuff that seems to be negative, or at least some people thought were negative about this guy. But then you also have some things that he was doing that make him seem like a great guy.
Yeah. It just sounds like somebody that wants to be in control.
Yeah, control, I think, is a good word, but at the same time, willing to help people out, really wanted to help people out. And it didn't matter whether they attended his church or not. St. Michael was struck by lightning and burned down in 1974. Father Kunz fought to have the church rebuilt. He had a busy schedule. He said a daily mass, ran St. Michael's school, and oversaw the finances of the church and school. He also mentored teachers, counseled parishioners, did lawn maintenance for the church cemetery, and cooked for the church's Friday fish fries.
That's a lot. Well, he's doing this to himself, though. I'm sure that he could have asked an altar kid to cut the grass.
He could have paid somebody to cut the grass.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it does sound like he was involved in a lot. In the fall of 1997, Father Kunz started working with Peter Kelly, a lawyer and parishioner, to produce the radio show Our Catholic Family. During their recording sessions, they discussed topics like sacraments and the temptations of the world. And as I said before, his messages could be perceived as harsh. He said in one episode, per the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, when a person commits an individual mortal sin, he is subject to the same consequences as Adam and Eve. And we know Adam and Eve were expelled from paradise. Secondly, he inherits, or he deserves, the same consequences as Satan himself.
Probably didn't go over too well with some of the parishioners.
It's a guy who, he doesn't mince words. He has a very strong view, right, on a number of subjects. Shortly before his death, Father Kunz decided the radio show was too much and convinced his close friend, Father Charles Fiore, to take over as co-host. According to the Journal-Sentinel, Fiore was a priest who had no home parish.
A floater priest.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
On the night of March 3rd, 1998, Father Fiore joined Father Kunz and Peter Kelly in the studio so they could record Fiore's first episode. Father Fiore dropped Father Kunz off at St. Michael around 10 p.m. Father Fiore thought Father Kunz was oddly quiet during the drive. His expression seemed troubled. Fiore told him, as quoted by the Journal-Sentinel, "Al, you've been a good friend for so many years." When Kunz said nothing in response, Fiore said, "Al, I really do love you." Kunz's eyes filled with tears and he said, I know. All right. Knowing that this man is about to die.
Yeah.
Because we already know that.
Right.
This is a strange back and forth.
It really is.
Somewhat foreboding almost.
Seems like obviously his mind was preoccupied
with something. And, he kind of wells up with tears. Why? Is it because of whatever was preoccupying him? Something that was troubling him? I mean, these are all things we have to take into consideration.
And then the touching words from his fellow father, maybe that was enough to have those tears roll out.
Father Kunz lived inside the school. In a conference room he converted to a studio apartment. Around 10:22 p.m., an unnamed witness overheard Father Kunz speaking angrily into the phone. The witness heard him tell the caller he couldn't see them later that week. Furthermore, I don't think we have anything else to talk about. The police later learned he was on the phone with another priest who said they discussed church business. Now, if you're someone who overhears that, I think you could take it a couple of different ways.
Sure you could.
Now, he said, speaking angrily, and in an angry tone, you could take, furthermore, I don't think we have anything else to talk about, as almost kind of like an FU. I'm done with you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
On March 4th, 1998, teacher Brian Jackson found Father Kunz's body inside the school. In early 1997, Father Kunz and Father Fiore traveled to New Hampshire to visit Magdalen College. In search of a new teacher for the school, Brian Jackson graduated Magdalen College in May of that year and talked to Father Kunz about teaching at St. Michael. He began working there in August 1997. He wasn't paid for his work. Father Kunz did pay his apartment rent and changed the oil in his car. Kunz also took him to the grocery store and occasionally gave him cash.
All right, so you're going to come work for us for free, but we're going to feed you and sprinkle some cash on you now and then. And by the way, I'm going to change the oil for you.
Personally?
Yeah. That's an extra bonus that other churches don't offer.
True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help find you options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states. Homes.com knows that when it comes to home shopping, it's never just about the house or condo, it's about the home. And what makes a home is more than just the house or property. It's the location and the neighborhood. If you have kids, it's also schools, nearby parks, and transportation options. That's why Homes.com goes above and beyond to bring home shoppers the in-depth information they need to find the right home. And when I say in-depth, I'm talking deep. Each listing features comprehensive information about the neighborhood, complete with a video guide. They also have details about local schools with test scores, state rankings, and student-to-teacher ratio. They even have an agent directory with the sales history of each agent. So when it comes to finding a home, not just a house, this is everything you need to know, all in one place. Homes.com. We've done your homework. Brian Jackson told the police that he arrived at the school a few minutes after 7 a.m. on March 4th, 1998. He looked through two sets of glass doors and saw someone on the floor, as well as a pool of dark liquid that seeped across the hallway. He realized it was Father Kunz. He checked for a pulse, thought he felt one, and ran to call 911. Brian was distressed in the call, but he made an unusual comment to the dispatcher at the end, saying, "I suppose I'm a suspect."
That is a very bizarre thing to say.
It really is, because you're in the middle of kind of this, what had to have been a very chaotic situation, right? You find this person who you know very well hurt. They still have a pulse. But what are you worried about? That you're a suspect.
Yeah.
Police found a disturbing crime scene. Someone slit Father Kunz's throat and stabbed him. He was nearly decapitated. According to the Journal Sentinel, he had bruises on the back of his hands, indicating he put up a fight.
So that would be a very disturbing scene.
Yeah, no doubt. It also seems like a very up close and personal attack.
An angry attack.
Yeah, you think about shooting someone from 20, 30 feet away versus being right up with them, stabbing them, drawing that blade across a person's neck.
So hard that you cut through. Yeah.
And almost decapitate him. Yeah, it seems personal to me. Father Kunz's belt was unbuckled as if he was getting ready for bed. A ring of keys was lying near his hand. The murder weapon has never been found. Detectives collected DNA swabs and fingerprints. Lead detective Gwen Rupert told WMTV that investigators believed it was a burglar or someone like that who surprised him. They got into the church, or he, for whatever reason, opened the door for him, asking for money, looking at something in the hallway to steal.
That sounds like a realistic possibility.
I think it is, right? It's a plausible initial theory. You have someone who gets in there, they're looking for something to steal, they encounter Father Kunz, and it goes bad. The police thought Principal Maureen O'Leary was not forthcoming when they questioned her. She even told them, "You'll never solve it. You should just let it go."
Oh, when someone says that, it's almost like you're wrapped into this somehow. You just need to let this go. Let it go, guys.
Yeah, it just seems strange. I mean, this is a person that she, has some sort of relationship with. What it is, may be up for debate. We may talk about it more, but why would you not want this person's murder solved? Why would you tell the police you'll never solve it, just let it go?
It's like she's hiding something.
Yeah, it's very suspicious. In 2018, Maureen confirmed to the Catholic World Report, "I did make that statement, not to obstruct justice, but to stop the scandal." She explained she was frustrated when the police were besmirching Father Kunz's character. Okay, the word besmirch is not used nearly as often as it should be anymore.
Yeah, there's no researching about it.
Did you say besearching? Okay. I don't know. When I hear that word, I think of like two guys in the 1700s or something. They both have their white gloves on. One says, "You've besmirched me," and he smacks the other guy across the face, and then they draw pistols at dawn or, whatever.
Or you see Beavis and Butthead doing the same scene, but in Beavis and Butthead style.
Do they use the word besmirched?
No, I just can see them doing it.
Oh, okay. Well, they would probably use besmirched,
yes,
as you just did. Brian Jackson was a suspect for years. Investigators learned Father Kunz and Brian didn't always get along. Shortly before the murder, Brian made plans to go to the opera with a fellow teacher, but Father Kunz told them they had to help at a church event. Brian admitted they were upset. They couldn't go to the opera. In the hours before Kunz was found, they talked about it on the phone. He maintained that he never left his apartment. But within days of the murder, Brian Jackson moved out of his apartment and moved in with Father Charles Fiore. Brian said he needed support in dealing with Father Kunz's murder. Some investigators thought Brian and Father Fiore were too cozy, per the Journal Sentinel, but Brian denied that he was attracted to men when asked by a detective. Okay, so too cozy can mean a lot of different things.
It can.
But in this context, it seems as though there were some investigators that thought maybe they had a relationship.
Yeah. Lovers?
Maybe. Another potential suspect was parishioner Maura Smith. After the murder, someone called the sheriff's department to report that Maura's reaction to Kunz's death was, quote, pretty over the top.
Oh, one of those.
Father Kunz met Maura Smith in 1997. Maura was a single mother and a Marine veteran who was waiting tables at a diner in Wanakee near St. Michael. Father Kunz came in most mornings for breakfast and invited her to church. A detective spoke to Maura at the diner. She said she loved Kunz like a father. Maura agreed to go to the station to answer more questions. Before her interview, detectives spoke to two women who disclosed they had sexual contact with Father Kunz. The police asked Maura the same question, and she was outraged. She said Kunz never made advances and the police were trying to ruin his reputation.
So very offended.
But here's the second person, right, who has said that the police were trying to ruin his reputation or something along those lines. But you also have two other women who told detectives they had sexual contact with Father Kunz.
Which is not okay if you are a father at the Catholic Church.
Well, and can you also look at whether or not these women had significant others who could have found out about this, possibly making that a motive for murder?
Possibly.
Mora explained that Father Kunz was a gentleman. He sometimes took women out to eat, opened doors for them, and offered his arm when they were walking together, as he did for others. He occasionally gave Mora money to buy food and clothes for her sons. He once helped her deal with her ex-boyfriend, Lynn Snowden, who pressured her to leave town with him. Father Kunz told him to back off. So, the father's kind of a badass too, I guess, apparently.
You have a father coming at you and saying, back off, young man.
Or I'll give you one of these.
Yes.
According to the Journal Sentinel, another set of investigators went to Mora's babysitter's apartment during the interview and offered her kids ice cream if they would draw pictures of Mora's knives. Mora's older son refused to do it, but her 5-year-old drew a combat-style knife.
It's those younger kids. They always give it away.
What kind of knife you have?
Yeah.
But it's strange, right? I will give you ice cream if you draw us a picture of your mom's knives.
Yeah. Just draw me mommy's knives.
Now, Detective Don Johnson tells a different story. She said she went to Mora's apartment and saw a child's drawing of a knife on the fridge. It could not have been the one police asked for because that would have been put into the case file. Detective Johnson said Mora snatched the picture away when she asked about it and said it was, quote, just something I used to have.
That's more believable to me.
It is, but it's also very strange that you would snatch that picture off the fridge and say, oh, that's nothing. That's something I used to have.
Yeah, don't look at that.
Nothing to see here.
Yeah.
But as we have in a lot of cases, right, versions of events and who is telling the truth. Mora provided hair and blood samples that did not match the DNA from the crime scene. She was also questioned by Detective Wayne Honer, who gained her trust because he was in the Marines. He asked her if she killed Father Kunz. Mora replied, not directly.
That's a strange response.
That's a very strange answer. There's, yes, I was involved. There's no, I wasn't involved. I had nothing to do with it. Not directly implies that, yes, you had some involvement.
Just not directly.
She said she felt responsible for his death because she did nothing to stop it. She explained that she and other women in her family had a sixth sense. She felt a sense of dread the Sunday before the murder, and as she prayed, a voice told her, he will be silenced.
Oh, this is getting very interesting.
And also very Hollywood. I mean, this is almost like a plot point from a movie.
Yeah.
Or something. She said she woke up late on the night of March 3rd and sensed that Father Kunz was in danger and she needed to go to him. She woke up her sons and was about to get in the car with them, but she realized if she went, she could be putting them at risk. She wondered if she should call the police, but she worried that they would think she was crazy. And if something did happen, they would think she was responsible.
All possibilities.
Mora later told Detective Honer that she saw the murder in a vision. And some of the details she saw were not public knowledge at the time.
So she's saying she's like a clairvoyant?
Which is very similar to a clairvoyant.
Yeah, it's just a better version.
It's just a different variant.
Yes.
No, but, she said, her family had a sixth sense. She said she had this vision. But when you give details of a murder that only the killer and the authorities are supposed to know, it doesn't make you look great. Either you really are clairvoyant or clairvariant, as you would call it, or you had something to do with this murder and you were there.
That's true. But, I remember when I was a little boy, I would walk through my neighborhood, through an old school, and I would see these people. And later I realized they were dead, but nobody else saw them. But I could see them. So I knew I had a sense. I just wasn't sure what sense it was.
Is it the fourth sense, the fifth sense, or the sixth sense?
Yeah.
Did you tell your friends I see dead people?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a really good guy help me out, though. Tried to walk me through it. Then I realized he was dead, too.
Do you look like Bruce Willis?
Actually, he kind of did. Yeah.
You had a very interesting childhood.
I know.
So back to these details, though, right? One example was that Morris said the TV was blaring. It was actually Father Kunz's radio that was playing, but she was close. She also described a red light coming from a closet. Investigators noted a red furnace indicator light shining in a room off of the hallway where the body was found.
Wow. Okay.
Investigators served warrants on Moore's home in the summer of 1998, and they seized knives, a bat, tools, photos of Kunz, and other items. But she was not arrested. And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with the fact that they didn't find her DNA.
Yeah. You don't have her DNA, it's going to be a tough sell.
Now, if they had it, that coupled with these things she was saying, she definitely would have been arrested.
Right.
Speculation was rampant after the murder. For example, someone slit a calf's throat and removed its genitals on the night of March 2nd, 1998, in a remote dairy farm less than 15 miles from the church. Some believe this was a rehearsal for the killer, although there is no proven connection between this incident and the death of Father Kunz.
Just could have been a very random act.
A strange one, but yeah, random. I think oftentimes it's easy to look at something and say, well, is this connected? It's strange, but there's no evidence whatsoever that it is. The police did look into how a series of burglaries could be linked to the murder. St. Michael's School was robbed in early 1998. Around that time, religious statues were stolen from Catholic churches and other buildings in Wisconsin. One theory was that St. Michael was targeted again on March 4th, and Father Kunz surprised the burglar.
Yeah, but if somebody was going to go back and rob the church, or somebody different robbing the church, doesn't it seem extreme to kill the priest in that way?
Slit his throat.
And stab.
If you were surprised, could you just not knock the guy out?
Exactly.
Or, incapacitate him in some way? Again, I go back to this slitting of the throat and nearly decapitating him is seeming like very personal.
Right.
Not really a stranger type of thing. Not that it couldn't be. It just seems more personal than that. In May 1998, the police found several missing statues in Necedah, Wisconsin, at the shrine of the Queen of the Holy Rosary, Mediatrix of Peace. Back in November 1949, a farmer's wife named Mary Ann Van Hoof claimed she saw the Virgin Mary in the doorway of her bedroom. She claimed she saw her again on May 28, 1950. On August 15th of that year, around 100,000 people came to the farm in hopes of seeing the Virgin Mary too.
Wow.
That is a lot of people.
It really is.
But you've heard these stories, right? Someone has a potato chip that looks like it has a picture of Jesus on it or something. And the next thing you know, it's on the news, or there's a stain that somehow looks like the Virgin Mary and people are flocking from all over.
Or there's a statue crying blood tears and people are like, let me go see why that's happening.
Is that real or something you saw in a movie?
No, that's real.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think if I saw that, I'd be interested in that too.
Yeah.
because that seems very strange.
You'd flock to see that, wouldn't you?
The rest of the stuff just seems like a coincidence, but...
You know, what was really real was that potato chip shaped like you talking into your microphone.
Did that occur when I was not here and you were down here or something?
Yeah, I found it, and I was going to give it to you, but I was so hungry
that you ate.
I couldn't wait. But it was really cool. I should have took a picture.
For 34 years, Van Hoof continued to see Mary and other saints. She was denounced by 2 bishops in 1955 and 1975, but still thousands of people came to the shrine, and many claim they were miraculously healed of disease. Van Hoof died in 1984.
Believe what you want to believe, right? I mean, it sounds like some people believed there was real power, but yet 2 bishops said, no, it's not.
There's nothing to it. By 1998, there was a group of 150 Shriners in the community who were devoted to Van Hoof's message. Father Kunz's church was one of 2 that welcomed them for Mass. One of the Shriners, Jeffrey Moss, became a suspect in the missing statues case after he stole a statue from a funeral. First of all, who steals statues? And why in the world would you steal a statue from a funeral?
It's kind of messed up.
When the police questioned him, he expressed his belief that communists were going to burn down all Catholic churches and an asteroid would soon hit the earth. He led the police to a tunnel that housed a collection of missing statues and supplies to survive the end of the world. He explained that he collected statues and other religious items, so the Catholic religion would continue after the asteroid hit.
Okay, like I got a bunker of Catholic stuff, and I will revive the religion after the asteroid hits, and we can safely walk amongst the earth again.
Which explains why he was stealing these statues.
Yeah.
Moss would later plead guilty to 9 charges and was sentenced to probation. When asked about Father Kunz, Moss told investigators he thought the priest was gay and didn't trust him, but he had no ill will towards him. He also provided the DNA sample that did not match the one from the crime scene. So this guy had, he had a number of things going on.
Sure
let's be honest. Not that an asteroid couldn't hit us and, be a world killer.
They get close every year.
They do.
Yeah.
John Kavanaugh, a Dane County sheriff's deputy, believed his nephew, Joseph Kavanaugh, was the killer. Joseph had a troubled life. He said he was sexually abused as a child. He lied about his age and joined the military at age 17. He was dishonorably discharged and sent home early, but his family didn't know why. Soon after getting his discharge reclassified to general, he was arrested for attacking and raping a woman. He blamed it on the trauma he suffered in the military. He then told his family he got married and had children in Germany, but they all died in a car accident. In 1981, Kavanaugh was sentenced to 5 years in prison. 4 years after he was released, Kavanaugh's grandfather was attacked and had no memory of the incident. No one was ever arrested, but Joseph was suspected. According to former Deputy John Kavanaugh, on the night of March 3rd, 1998, Joseph visited his cousin in Prairie du Sac, about 15 miles from St. Michael. Joseph lived over 100 miles away in La Crosse and had never visited before. He didn't spend the night. So there's some interesting stuff here, right? John is a sheriff's deputy.
Yeah.
Who believed his nephew could have possibly been involved. You've got this kind of murky discharge. There's also the attack and rape of a woman. He spent time in prison, and then his grandfather was attacked and he's suspected of that. But, to me, it's this visit very close to St. Michael when he apparently had never visited there before, didn't have a real reason to probably, and he lived pretty far away. And he didn't spend the night. So what did he go there for, if he did go there? It was said that he showed up at his sister's house on March 4th and was jumpy and anxious. John Kavanaugh believed Joseph's unusual behavior fit the timeline of the murder. So there's some strange things here, but it's all pretty flimsy, right? You'd have to say that.
Yeah, there's nothing concrete that ties him. Yeah.
Nothing that conclusively is linking him to the murder. According to the Journal Sentinel, detectives say Joseph Kavanaugh spent the night with his sister on March 2nd, 24 hours before the murder, and his wife confirmed he was home the night of March 3rd. However, after they divorced, she revealed Joseph told her to lie for him, and she feared for her life if she didn't do it.
Okay, that's a pretty important change in the story.
It is. Obviously, there's a reason why he needs this alibi. But for what, we don't know. In 2002, Kavanaugh hanged himself in jail while waiting trial on 7 felonies for kidnapping and repeatedly raping his ex-girlfriend.
So now you're not going to get the answers.
No, but there's no doubt, this was not a good guy. Before he died, Joseph Kavanaugh reportedly confessed to his biological father. But police could never confirm that this actually happened. According to John Kavanaugh, Joseph admitted that he passed through Dane in 1998 on his way to see his cousin. He stopped at St. Michael because Father Kunz was known for giving money to people in need. But when he asked Kunz for money, he said no. Joseph said he roughed him up.
Somebody more than roughed him up.
Yeah, roughed him up is a euphemism, right, compared to what happened to Father Kunz. In 2001, scientists were able to develop a partial profile from the DNA found at the crime scene. The DNA was found somewhere significant, somewhere the killer would have had reason to touch, per Detective Gwen Rupert. However, it can't be uploaded into a nationwide database or genealogical search. Detectives still need a full DNA sample for comparison.
Sounds a little mysterious.
Somewhere significant, somewhere the killer would have had reason to touch. Yeah, it's cryptic.
Yes.
And I get it, right? Police do this all the time. They can't come out and just tell us. They can say cryptic things. They can't lay everything out. In 2005, the police compared Joseph Kavanaugh's DNA with the DNA from the crime scene, but it wasn't a match. One of the most well-known theories in this case is that Father Kunz was killed because he was going to expose priests who were accused of sexual misconduct by reading a list of names on the radio show.
Well, that would get somebody's attention.
That would be a bombshell. And I think if your name was one that was going to be read, that could be a motive for murder. Father Charles Fiore did tell several people he and Father Kunz were compiling a list of priests involved in sexual misconduct.
So why wouldn't you want to kill both?
Well, that's a good question, because it makes it sound like Father Fiore knows what the list is going to be as well. So if that's true, silencing just Father Kunz doesn't really solve all your problems. Now, it could be what causes the list to never be revealed.
Sure. You scare the...
You know what?
Yeah.
Out of anybody that was going to talk about it. One of Kunz's friends, Father Ryan St. Anne Scott, told the police Kunz was killed by church leaders who promoted the modernization of the church. Scott said, as quoted by the Journal Sentinel, he knew too much. He had resourceful contacts. He was about to expose the multifaceted corruption that has invaded the church today. In my opinion, there would have been no other reason.
It's kind of a big statement to say the church leaders did this.
Yeah, it's a theory, right? It's his opinion, but it is a bold statement. He was killed by church leaders because, they wanted to modernize the church. We talked about the fact that he wasn't into that, right? He was kind of sticking to the old ways. But would that be a reason that he would have to be killed?
I think there'd be maybe a better way to have him removed. I mean, if you're a church-going person and you believe in the 10 Commandments, one of the 10 Commandments say,
do not kill.
yeah,
I think it's one of the biggies.
I think so.
5 years before the murder, Scott was convicted of felony misconduct in public office for altering a check while serving as finance director for the city of Edgerton. After that, he focused on religious life and became a priest. But in 1997, the Bishop of La Crosse, Wisconsin, Raymond Burke, wrote a letter warning others that Scott was not actually ordained. Scott claimed that he was raped by multiple priests in the 1970s, but church leaders and police found no truth to his story. After an investigation, after Kunz was murdered, he told the police he gave Kunz details to prove the rapes occurred, and Kunz was on the verge of making this public. The police also spoke to Stephen Brady, the founder of Roman Catholic Faithful, a nonprofit in Illinois. Brady said Kunz got involved in 1996 when the organization got a tip about Daniel Ryan, the bishop of Springfield, Illinois. A female sex worker reported that she saw the bishop picking up male sex workers and provided names and dates. Brady contacted the sex workers and obtained more information. Brady wanted to get church officials involved and was told to contact Father Kunz, who had connections with higher-ups in the church. The first accusations against Daniel Ryan went public in 1997, but it wasn't until 2006 that an official report concluded Ryan engaged in sexual relationships with several men, including deacons and other priests.
Okay.
That's 9 years.
It is.
Now, let's face it, churches have a history of covering some of this stuff up. That's just a fact.
Oh, yeah.
It's been well documented.
Yes.
Obviously, all of this makes the church look very bad. And they don't want that. They don't want that publicity, that bad publicity.
No, they would like to sweep it under the rug.
Additionally, Father Kunz's friend Morris Smith told investigators that Kunz once asked if she had premonitions about him. He showed her a letter with a Vatican seal, warning him to end his investigation into pedophile priests. It should be noted, though, that the police never found this letter. So you got a lot of people talking about a lot of things. Very few of these things were able to be proven.
Right. That makes it hard.
It does make it tough. You don't know what's real, what's not real.
It's just hearsay.
But the one thing that I will say, Gibbs, is a lot of it centers around inappropriate sexual acts that, were being performed by priests. And the fact that maybe Father Kunz was about ready to expose some of these people.
And we know things like that happened.
And would it be inconceivable that somebody would kill to keep that from happening? One of the people on the list, maybe a bunch of them got together. I mean, there's a number of different things to consider.
Yeah, I think the possibility exists.
The police also questioned Bishop Richard Williamson, who was associated with the Society of St. Pius X, a group of priests who rejected the reforms of Vatican II. Williamson was questioned during the period where Kunz's manner of death was kept private and said, I know things. I know things that could lead to, and then he made a slashing motion across his throat.
Okay.
Now, that could be a reference to how, Father Kunz died, or that could just be a reference to death. I mean, that is a reference that people make.
Right.
But given the fact of how Father Kunz was killed, it's pretty strange.
Scary.
On March 2nd, 2000, Sheriff Gary Hamlin announced at a news conference that Father Kunz had several intimate relationships with women in his parish for many years. Some of these women were married, and some relationships were ongoing at the time of his death. Hamlin did not say if the relationships were sexual or platonic, but did say the killer may have been upset by these relationships.
Maybe jealous because he was having a relationship with another woman instead of just having a relationship with her, whoever her is.
Or maybe a male partner of one of these women was upset. But I think the word relationship, that's pretty broad.
It really is.
When it says that, he didn't know whether these relationships were sexual or platonic, well, that's a pretty big difference between the two. In a later interview, Hamlin said they weren't trying to ruin Father Kunz's reputation, but they were trying to find the killer.
Well, sometimes on your way of trying to solve a crime, you learn things about the victim that's less than flattering.
Yeah. Yeah. That happens, unfortunately. But again, some of this stuff comes from, second parties, which may or may not be true. And even the stuff that they did learn, again, the difference between a sexual and platonic relationship is huge.
It really, big time.
Many were upset and disturbed by this news. And Morris Smith reached out to the Journal-Sentinel to defend Father Kunz. Dane County Detective Kevin Hughes remained focused on Brian Jackson as a suspect. In 2000, Hughes traveled to Missouri, where Jackson was living. He talked to Jackson's future father-in-law, former detective Joe Mullenschlater. Mullenschlater agreed to keep an eye on Jackson and report details of suspicious conversations. Okay, if you're the future father-in-law and you're being asked to kind of keep tabs on this guy, maybe you don't want him to be your son-in-law.
And is he the right person to keep an eye on him or report back? Because if this is going to be his future son-in-law, maybe he likes this guy and doesn't want to jeopardize any of that.
After Jackson was questioned by police, Mullenschlater picked him up from the station. Mullenschlater reported that Jackson asked during the ride, "How can they prosecute me if they don't have a knife?"
Yeah, it's a good question.
It's a good question, but it's also yet another thing in this case being said that just sounds very strange. Now, if you said, "How can they prosecute me when I didn't have anything to do with this?" Okay.
That's different. Yeah.
That's different. How can they prosecute me if they don't have a knife? It just seems weird. It's like, I got rid of the knife. How can they prosecute me?
He's just missing really 3 words.
Yeah.
How can they prosecute me if they don't have the knife that I used?
Detective Hughes looked into the theory Brian Jackson or Father Fiore were gay and killed Father Kunz because he found out. As we talked about earlier, Brian Jackson denied that he was attracted to men, and there was no evidence he ever dated men. However, Brian did tell the police information about Father Fiore. Fiore had a satellite TV. At the time, the satellite dish could only capture one program. If someone was watching a movie on one TV set, it would play on all the other sets. More than once, Brian turned on the TV and saw explicit scenes of naked men.
That'd be kind of embarrassing. If you don't want people to know.
Yeah, if you're okay with people knowing, not as embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like back in your college days,
Not that embarrassing.
No.
Officers also found 2 photos in Fiore's nightstand. One photo showed Fiore with his arm around Brian. The second photo was of Brian, who was wearing a robe and looked like he had just woken up. Okay, I mean, it's not a smoking gun, but, it doesn't look great. Why are you wearing a robe? Why do you look like you just woke up?
I wish you had a robe on that one time we first went to Crime Con. We had to share that bed. It's like, what the heck? Put something on, please.
And I said, those aren't pillows. The prosecutor declined to press charges. Additionally, Brian's DNA did not match the new partial DNA profile. And we've said that how many times now, right? Are they ruling all these people out because their DNA does not match what was found at the crime scene? Years later, Brian Jackson spoke to the Journal-Sentinel to say he is innocent and believes the investigation was waylaid by the focus on him.
Well, we know sometimes law enforcement will get tunnel vision. I don't know if that's the case here, but it can happen.
It can happen, does happen. A new sheriff took office in 2006. He, along with other investigators, believed Detective Kevin Hughes had tunnel vision regarding Brian. So here's a sheriff coming out and just flat out saying it. This detective did have tunnel vision. Over the years, officials have acknowledged that mistakes were made during the investigation. For example, the police allowed Principal Maureen O'Leary to remove Father Kunz's Rolodex from his office, which had the names and numbers of everyone close to him. No one is quite sure why she wanted it, and the police never got it back.
Okay, that is interesting.
Well, there could have been some valuable information in there. No way to know. First responders found Brian Jackson outside with blood on his hands. The police never impounded Jackson's car or searched it for trace evidence, and he drove away within hours of the murder.
Mistake.
It sounds like there were a number of mistakes. Detective Wayne Honer, who was involved in the early investigation, suspected local tattoo artist Lynn Snowden. And we said it earlier, right? Lynn Snowden was named by Maura Smith. Maura and Snowden briefly dated. She claimed he wanted her to run away with him, but she wouldn't leave her kids or St. Michael. She ended the relationship when Father Kunz informed her of Snowden's criminal record. Maura claimed Snowden wouldn't leave her alone, so Kunz warned him to back off. Snowden was convicted of misdemeanors in North Carolina. He worked for a circus for several years and eventually moved to Wisconsin to raise his daughter from his failed marriage. Okay. The misdemeanor convictions, I don't know what you make of that, but working for a circus, in my mind, that puts you at the top of the list.
You are just trying to ruin us now with the circus too.
Oh, the carnies love me. When his daughter was a teenager, Snowden turned himself in and admitted to having sexual contact with her teen friend. He was charged with a misdemeanor and put on probation. So maybe I'm going to change my mind about these misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Because to me, that probably shouldn't be a misdemeanor, depending on exactly what it was. But really, any sexual contact with an underage girl, that results in a misdemeanor and probation. I'm kind of shocked by that.
Maybe it was just the type of deal he made.
It could have been. We don't have all the details. Snowden's 19-year-old daughter tragically died in a car accident in 1993, and it was said that he was never the same after that. After Father Kunz was murdered, Snowden didn't show up at the diner, where Moore worked for 9 days. When he did return, he had cuts on his face and said he didn't want to talk about it. Snowden ate at the diner a few days before he was questioned, and Moore mentioned that she gave his name to the police. So he was prepared. When they showed up, he was calm and had answers to every question. He insisted he was home with his friend/landlord, Donna O'Malley, who would vouch for him. Morris Smith and other witnesses had described Snowden carrying around a folding buck knife, but he showed the police a small Swiss Army knife. And those are two very different types of knives.
They are. But if he knew the police were coming, it's an easy switch out, right?
Yeah. You're not going to bring the big folding buck knife. You're going to bring the Swiss Army knife, which most of them have a pretty small blade. Donna O'Malley confirmed Snowden's alibi. She mentioned the buck knife during the interview, but then called afterward and said she was mistaken. She had never seen anything but the Swiss Army knife.
Okay, that's strange.
It's strange. It's almost like she mentioned it to him and he was like, oh no, you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
You got to call him back and say you were mistaken. Now, I'm speculating. I have no idea how it went down. In the early 2000s, Detective Don Johnson questioned Snowden again. He abruptly ran out of the room to throw up. He also gave investigators a buck knife and a DNA sample. No blood was found on the knife, and his DNA did not match the crime scene profile.
Well, I mean, the buck knife could have been a buck knife he bought somewhere and gave it to him.
Right. But here again, we have another person whose DNA does not match the DNA found at the crime scene.
Sounds like the DNA sample he gave him was what he threw up. Hey, I got your DNA sample out there in the lobby.
I'm not sure that's how they take it. In 2018, Snowden told the Journal Sentinel that he only met Father Kunz once or twice. At Donna O'Malley's restaurant, he asked the priest if he could use his metal detector in the church cemetery, and Father Kunz said yes. That was the only time he went to the church, and he never went inside. He said he and Maura had a brief fling, but he didn't want to run away with her. Father Kunz never told him to leave her alone.
So maybe Maura is telling him some stories, maybe?
Or maybe making more out of it than what it was. I don't know. On the night of the murder, he was at his tattoo shop, which he ran from his home. Donna O'Malley, who has since died, was upstairs. Snowden claimed the police didn't believe her statement because she drank excessively. They said she could have blacked out, but he never saw her in that condition. Snowden also said he never showed up at the diner with cuts on his face. He explained that he eventually stopped answering questions because the police were harassing him. In March 2018, the Dane County Sheriff's Office ran a social media campaign via Facebook and Twitter with the hashtag Who Killed Father Kunz. The campaign discussed the different theories in the case and asked the public for information. One Facebook post mentioned financial issues as a motive. As we know, large amounts of money were being moved from one church account to another. Father Kunz also changed the executor of his will and who would receive an inheritance. Within a week of his death, offertory money was missing from the sacristy.
Oh, there's a mystery right there. Who did that and why?
Who took the money? In February 2023, current lead detective Tim Blank confirmed there were allegations of sexual abuse against Father Kunz. Blank told WMTV, "I can't go any further than that at the moment." And that's certainly a possibility as well.
Yeah, there's another layer there now.
And that's a tough allegation to make and not be able to expand on it. But you would have to say, Gibbs, it's possible that somebody that maybe he sexually abused came back to get their revenge.
Yeah.
Father Kunz has never been named by the church as a credible abuser, but many believe the disclosure list provided by the Wisconsin diocese are incomplete. And that wouldn't surprise me at all.
I don't think anybody would be surprised by that.
Detective Blank told Dateline in 2024 that there are persons of interest, but they have not been publicly named. He added that they get 1 or 2 tips per month, and the crime lab reaches out to them when they have new techniques or technology to see if evidence can be retested. It's been 27 years since Father Alfred Kunz was murdered. If you have information about his death, you can call the Dane County Sheriff's Office at 608-284-6900. You can also submit an anonymous tip online or email tips@danesheriff.com. So as we wrap this case up, Gibbs, obviously it was a horrific murder. There are a ton of different theories in this case. There have been many different people who have been looked at. There's been quite a few people whose DNA has been taken and it's been determined to not be a match. Now, there are some people who we've talked about that I never saw where their DNA was taken and compared. You know, there's a number of different angles here. There's a money angle. There's a inappropriate relationship / sexual relationship angle. And now, as we find out, you know, kind of late in the episode, there's also a sexual abuse angle.
Well, in that last one that you talked about, right? Now we have this possible claim of sexual abuse.
Well, and I would take it a step further. I mean, the detective actually said there were confirmed allegations So you have to be pretty sure to make that statement.
Yeah, you're just not going to toss that out there.
No, they have to be pretty certain. But I think, 27 years, they're still working on it, but does all these different possible motives, all these different people possibly involved or on the periphery make it that much tougher? In some cases, you have very little. In this case, it's like you got a plethora of information. So it's almost like you're trying to whittle stuff down.
I just think how it appears to be somebody very angry.
And why would somebody be angry? You answer that question. If you were sexually abused by this guy,
yeah, you'd be pissed.
You'd be angry.
Especially if it happened when you were younger and now you're grown and you can do something about it.
If you thought Father Kunz was having an inappropriate sexual relationship with your significant other, you'd be angry.
Yep.
If he was about ready to reveal something that someone or multiple people didn't want revealed, there's a motive there.
Yeah.
And then there's this kind of money angle that's a little bit murky, but obviously we know money is a motive for a lot of murders.
Sure. Agreed. Yeah.
I mean, in the end, I think this is one that can be solved because they have DNA.
Yes. They just got to align it with the right person.
Yes. And I think eventually we will find out whose DNA that is. I don't know how long it'll take, but with the technology getting better all the time, we will find out. But that's it for our episode on the murder of Father Alfred Kunz. We got a voicemail, Gibbs. You want to check that out?
Let's hear it.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Gibby. Darren calling from Raleigh. Just hope this voicemail finds you guys in good health, mentally, physically, and financially and spiritually. Just listen to your True Crime Unsolved regarding the Mad Trapper. And when you hear the title, it made me laugh because it made me think of possibly some kid or high schooler or what have you who just for whatever reason is hoarding a bunch of Trapper notebooks or why is stockpiling them for whatever reason. So it did make me laugh. But I did listen to the episode, and needless to say, this guy was a excellent hunter and excellent outdoorsman, because for him to do what he did in evading the police, the RCMP, was quite impressive, especially given that, he's literally living off the land, so to speak. He didn't, obviously, no GPS, no provisions, no vehicle, no anything, no four-wheelers, no nothing, just his 2 feet, his wits, and whatever hunting skills he had acquired throughout the years. So needless to say, this guy was, yes, he committed a horrible crime in murdering the 2 police officers, RCMP officers, but still, I will say that I was impressed with his living off of the land skills. So anyway, just wanted to get that comment in regarding the Mad Trapper. Anyway, hope you guys have a good rest of the year, week, month, what have you. Keep your head on the swivel and keep your own time ticking. Thank you.
All right, great voicemail. I do think, Gibbs, when you have someone who is self-sufficient, can live off the land, does that not make it tougher to find somebody?
It does. And I remember he's the guy that would walk backwards in his tracks to make sure that you weren't sure which direction he was going.
Yeah. The other thing I will say is I was a trapper keeper guy.
You look like a trapper keeper guy.
Back in the day, like elementary school.
You still are a trapper.
I love the trapper keepers.
There's trapper keepers sitting right there.
Yeah, I don't use them. Those are just for decoration.
I think it's a little strange, but whatever. Hey, you do you.
I know. YOLO. All right, buddy, that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
This summer, Pluto TV is exploding with thousands of free movies. Summer of Cinema is here. Feel the explosive action all summer long with movies like Gladiator, Mission Impossible, Beverly Hills Cop, Good Burger, and Transformers: Dark of the Moon. Bring the action with you and stream for free from all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.